Very good afternoon. We will start this parallel technical session 32 Hall D. Today, to conduct this session, we have been requested the Professor Premalata K of Anna University, Chennai to chair the session. And for co-chairing this session, we have requested Dr. Manas Kumar Bhoy, PDU Gandhinagar. So then we have three lectures lined up. One is SOAP lecture, state-of-the-art special lecture by Professor Murali Krishna, and then followed by a special lecture by Professor Abhishek Kumar of IIT Guwahati, and one more special lecture by Professor Rangaswamy of NIT Calicut. Let me have the pleasure of introducing the chair and co-chair to the delegates. Professor Premalata is working as professor in the Division of Soil Mechanics and Foundation Engineering, Department of Civil Engineering, College of Engineering, Gindi, Anna University, and very old college, Chennai. She has 34 years of experience in teaching, and she was awarded the Achievement Award for Research in 2002 at Anna University. She was the head of the Division of Soil Mechanics and Foundation Engineering from 2013 to 2018. She has published over 100 papers in international journals and conferences. She was the president of the Society of Civil Engineers 2014 to 15, CEG. She is the executive committee member, IGS, and building committee member, Alumni Association of CEG. On behalf of the organizing committee, I extend a hearty welcome to you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
And let me introduce the co-chair, Dr. Manas Kumar Bhoy. He is working as assistant professor in the Department of Civil Engineering, Pandit Deen Dayal Energy Institute, Gandhinagar. Previously, this was called PDPU. And he works in the area of ground improvement. And on behalf of the organizing committee, I extend a hearty welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Now I request the chair and co-chair to take over the session and conduct further proceedings. Over to you, madam, and Manas, sir. Please.
Thank you for the nice introduction, sir. I am very much honored that by giving this opportunity to chair this session. In this session, we have three speakers, eminent speakers. The first speaker, let me introduce first speaker first and let me give the lecture. Then we'll have question answer. Then we'll go for this second lecture. The first lecture we may give, all the lecture we may give 20 to 25 minutes for this. For that, then we'll take 5 minutes for a question answer at the end of each lecture. That's right, sir.
Yeah.
So, now I introduce. I'm very much honored to introduce Professor Murali Krishna. Murali Krishna is a professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering in IIT Tirupati. Before joining IIT Tirupati in May 2009, he was the faculty member at Department of Civil Engineering and IIT Guwahati. I think he has conducted the Indian Geotechnical Conference IGC 2019 in a grand manner. We were there. Dr. Murali Krishna obtained doctoral degree program from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, MTech from IIT Kanpur, BTech from Sri Venkateswara University College of Engineering, Tirupati. His research interests include earthquake geotechnics, geosynthetics, and ground improvement, site characterization, numerical and physical modeling of geotechnical structures. He is the recipient of BRNS Young Scientist Research Award, Boy Scout Fellowship and Heritage Fellowship. He was a visiting fellow at the Bristol University, UK, Surrey University, UK, and University Torino in Italy. He supervised 7 doctoral students, 24 master students, co-authored nearly 180 publications in international journals, conferences, book chapter. Professor Murali Krishna is an executive member and Life Fellow of ISET and Life Fellow of Indian Geotechnical Society, and he is also member of TC 203 of International Society of Soil Mechanics and Geotechnical Engineering since 2001. Also, he is a National Executive Committee member in the Indian Geotechnical Society main chapter. So I welcome Professor Murali Krishna to deliver his lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Manas, and thank you, Professor Premlata. I thank the organizers for inviting me to deliver this SYP lecture. And I congratulate whole organizing team led by Professor T.G. Sitaram and excellently organizing this whole program, online event in a 3D platform, smoothly going on. I congratulate all the team. So let me start my presentation. So we are in the last session of the whole technical feast. We are having all three days we had, and today is the fourth day in the last session. I hope you all had good lectures and all. So today my topic is on seismic analysis of pile foundations using an integrated approach. So the content will go like this one, and earthquake-induced failures and pile damage. Briefly, I will mention, and how the piles under seismic loading. What are some issues we can briefly discuss, and then what is integrated seismic analysis? What are various stages we'll put forward, and then what are the various methods available in the seismic analysis of pile foundations in a crisply. We can just quickly review, and then we focus on what is a simplified integrated method, and a exemplary study as an example case study will be taken, and then concluding remark. This is how I organized my talk. Before going further, I would like to acknowledge my co-author, Dr. Pradeep Kumar. He was my research scholar at IIT Guwahati. Currently, he is an assistant professor of Department of Civil and Infrastructural Engineering at IIT Jodhpur. And also, I would like to acknowledge my collaborator, Professor Subhamay Bhattacharya, who is the faculty and in University of Surrey, UK, who was a host for my Boss Cost Fellowship, and then subsequently he hosted Dr. Pradeep also for his Commonwealth Fellowship visit at University of Surrey. Some of these works are in collaboration of the Subi and Pradeep. That's one. So let me go to the talk, and some pictures showing the pile damages during earthquakes. Of course, several examples can be seen. Some buildings got failed, bridges got failed. And the main reason, if you see some of these failures, the structure as a whole looks to be okay, but there were the issues with the foundations which can be noticed under different earthquake conditions. Little more closer to these failures, if you see a bridge failure, $1 million bridge failed, which was reported by Bhattacharya et al. 2013, and also foundation failure. If you see the structure was totally intact, you can see. Okay, so the reasons for this one, whether is it superstructure failure or foundation failure. Of course, the examples what we are showing here are not the structural failures. The foundation failures are significant here. So in general, the failures, in all the failures, not really the structural failures, some foundation failures also will be there. Underlying soil for any structure where the underlying soil play a key role in overall stability of that particular structure. In terms of the site response to a particular earthquake motion, or in terms of the liquefaction potential at that particular earthquake condition, so how it would be behave. So that's how it will define the whole earthquake scenario and disaster scenario. So how the piles under seismic loading, with these quick examples, let us put out some points here. What soils naturally, they exist in multi-layered soils with variation of the properties. So this is one point to note. There is a different contrast in the layer properties, layer behavior under particular given earthquake conditions. That would be there. And in many of these earthquake conditions, The soft soils are most affected due to the interference effects and also layering effects, which are generally affecting the whole pile foundation behavior. So what these ground conditions would do, they strongly affect the pile behavior in terms of the changing the failure mechanism. There are different failure mechanisms are there. I'm not going into details like bending failure and buckling failure, okay, etc. Different failure mechanisms are there. So that failure mechanism, what is there, that will play an important role in the design. And location of the zone, the ground where it is located, what is the seismicity of that particular condition, that also significantly play a role in the performance of that piles under seismic loading. And particularly, the problem of soil liquefaction is significantly affects the pile behavior. So what it will do when the soil is going to liquefy, there is a substantial loss of the strength and stiffness because of the increase in the pore water pressure. So that lateral confinement of the pile foundation would be losing. Then obviously the pile behavior would be totally changing. Whole ground, natural frequency of the whole ground would be differing, and response to the particular earthquake motion would be differing. All such issues would be arising due to the soil liquefaction condition. And then when the particular ground is subject to the earthquake condition and also possibility of soil liquefaction, the whole pile soil system would be going into the non-linear conditions, and non-linearity of the soil behavior, non-linearity of the pile soil interface behavior and pile behavior, etc. All those things would be coming into picture, which completely make the whole problem as it's a complex dynamic soil structure interaction problem. So which we need to handle in this particular to solve this particular one. So when we look closely into the what would happen in the local site effects and on foundations, we can see a typical picture representing the what are the local site effects from the source. This earthquake is generated from this particular location, focus of earthquake, and it is traveling up to the site, wherever the site is considered here. Here a typical example of a bridge foundation is shown, but this can be of any ground, any place. There can be a building or any structure, it can be there. And surface earthquake waves which are generated from the source, which will traveling to the site, and from the site bedrock it would be traveling upwards, right? And then it affects the structure. So we need to take care into all these effects into the consideration while analyzing any structure for the seismic insurance, stability insurance. So with this whole considering whole things, so this is a integrated seismic analysis strategy for any geotechnical structure, we can say particularly, but it is mentioned here as a pile foundation. What's the thing? So what we need to have, we need to have the different input parameters we need to have. So one is this seismic. So we need to have this seismic hazard assessment of the particular site. So whatever the PZA values, what is the magnitude values we should have, what is the seismicity, nearby seismicity, past earthquake levels, all those things we have to study. And particularly at the particular site where the structure is located, what is the ground profile, what is the possible groundwater conditions is required, and then what is the type of the structure which is coming. Okay, now what type of the structure, what are the loads, etc. So those details also need to be there. And then when you have the soil conditions, we need to perform the advanced soil testing condition to identify the strength and stiffness of the properties, particularly because we are dealing with the seismic conditions. We need to have the dynamic characterization of the soil, and once you get the inputs from this one, we need to perform the ground response analysis to understand how the ground motion at the bedrock is transferring to the on the surface, where it is touching the actually the superstructure. So how it is getting modified, what are the effects, what is the frequency content variation, all those things need to be considered by inputting the parameters what we identify in the advanced soil testing. And then we have to do the performance-based assessment. The particular structure analysis need to be done to see whether the particular structure is performing well or not. So of course, there are certain logical things can be taken. If the performance criteria is satisfied, it's fine. If it is not satisfied, then we have to revise the designs or whether ground modification, pile foundation design, either the superstructure modifications, etc. We have to do. Finally, we have to close the structure whether the structure is seismically safe. That's what we have to do the thing. So in this whole process, there are various steps involved in the particular thing. On the step one is the quantification of the seismic hazard. As mentioned, we need to obtain the expected PZA, moment magnitude, etc. And of course, when the a structure is a complicated, very sensitive structure and a huge budget structure, then one can perform the site-specific deterministic seismic hazard analysis, DSHA or probabilistic seismic hazard analysis to get the ground motions at the particular site. Particularly, this will be done in very high sensitive structure, for example, nuclear power plants, etc. Or otherwise, we can also use some other literature available data. And if for the normal general structures, we can use the caudal provisions for getting the seismicity quantification of the seismic hazard or seismicity of a particular area. Coming to the second step is the site characterization and site response analysis, where we need to obtain the soil information in terms of the layering and also dynamic characterization, liquefaction potential, etc. need to be obtained. The obtained parameters shall be used to conduct the free field ground response analysis to be performed by any of the methods available. And the data, whatever we obtain from these above two steps, will be used for performing the integrated seismic analysis, considering the superstructure and also taking the ground condition effects, etc. into the whole thing to get a complete picture and a complete performance behavior of a superstructure, whatever intended structure under consideration. Then come to the third stage, there is seismic analysis of deep foundation. What is the objective of the seismic analysis is to estimate what are the induced stresses in the pile elements due to an external loading, and also estimate what is the resulting bending moments on the pile. That is what important. We have to make the piles very strong to withstand whatever the shear forces, bending moments that are going to generate into the ground due to the earthquake motion. Various methodologies can be adopted. Of course, initially they are all based on the subgrade reaction based Winkler approach. We can see several researchers have applied this particular one. Here, what we do, the soil will be modeled as a Winkler springs, and pile element will be considered in different methods they can adopt, and together they can get the response of the structure. And then we can have the advanced continuum approach where we completely model the ground structure, etc. by appropriate numerical models. For example, finite element method, boundary element, or finite difference method, etc. Several studies are there. And then one can adopt the physical model studies. For example, if the structure is very complicated, and they can go for the physical model studies like 1G shaking table tests and centrifuge tests and full scale load tests and all. So these are some pictures indicating the numerical modeling in continuum approach. This is one study by Kumar and Chaudhary where raft piled out foundation they considered in a Plaxis 3D model. This is a FLAG 3D model. Another researchers Xu and Fatahi in 2018 they considered the pile foundation continuum, and where we will take all the variation of the soil profiles, earthquake conditions, etc. And these are some examples of the physical model studies. Here, the model of a shaking table test performed by Lombardi and Bhattacharya, a large scale shaking table test. You can see the height of the tank as 2.4 meters and different test piles, the instrumentation here, so that we will get the understanding of the whole thing. And there are some studies on the centrifuge models adopted by different researchers. You can see the different soil profiles. This Scott Brandenburg also delivered one lecture in our conference in 2005. And there are full-scale tests by Rollins and Laswardi into 2021. Professor Rollins has delivered an excellent lecture on the real-scale blasting induced liquefaction and the performance of pile foundations, where you can see here about the 21 meters, 22 meters of the length of the piles are really tested inside to on site to get the observations. So the point here to note here, of course, the various studies are available but the amount of the time required and amount of the resources required in all these things to get the complete picture are very huge. Even in the numerical model, complete continuum numerical modeling means we have to have the expertise, and we have to get the reliable soil parameters, etc. They are the challenges what we have. So on the other side, the Wrinkler approach would provide reasonably very good data on the performance of the thing in terms of the pile response. What we mentioned, no, the soil can be modeled as springs, nonlinear springs, representing the realistic soil behavior. So the overview of the Wrinkler approach, whatever being considered in this particular study, is a nonlinear dynamic Wrinkler foundation. Here, the complete variation of the soil behavior in terms of its strain dependent displacement deformation behavior would be captured by appropriately choosing the soil spring constants, and also inputting the ground motions. What are the ground motions are obtained at different levels, that also can be provided in this particular one. So here the step 1 includes the independent free field ground response analysis need to be carried out, and the development of the soil pile interaction through PY springs. What are the PY springs, how the behavior would be there, that can be obtained, and then performing the nonlinear analysis combining the above two. So will be what are the ground response obtained at different spring level, that will be given as an input to motion to the springs, and accordingly we can obtain what is the response of the pile can be studied, so that complete behavior can be obtained. In the whole scenario, this problem, finding the PY springs is a very governing parameter in this one. Of course, there are the codal provisions. Generally, API 2007 recommendations generally can be followed to find the soil springs. However, the API code generally provides only for the standard soil without considering the liquefaction effect and associated decrease in the strength value. And in the case of liquefiable soil, there are certain modifications need to be adopted as per considering the realistic consideration. One is to neglect the total soil springs in the liquefied zones, so that area there will not be any lateral support, or then treating the liquefied sand as a very soft clay having very low strength can be taken here. Or another method is a P multiplied approach, as reducing the strength of P by curves by some factor can be adopted, which was recommended by Vandenberg et al. In 2007. So like based on these methods, one can choose appropriately. The soil strength can be deferred, the spring constants can be changed considering the realistic scenario of the earthquake condition. So this is the whole thing. What is the strategy of dealing the study? So now let me take quickly the example application what has been considered and presented in this particular paper will be explained here. To show the whole strategy, how to be implemented, a pile supported structure in a highly seismic zone, that is the Tezpur city of the Assam zone, is taken. The Assam and Tezpur city is marked as a zone 5 as per IS 1983-2016. And in this particular area, there are two configurations of pile foundations were taken. One is a single pile having a 0.6 meters diameter and 26 meters in length, a single pile. And another group piles, 2 by 2 group piles, 4-pile group is taken of similar geometry. And the strength of the material has been taken as M25 grade RCC concrete material. So this is the this bottom figure will shows the model, SAP model, Wrinkler spring model, which has been developed using the SAP 2000 is shown in this particular one. So now we'll take the step-by-step approach to demonstrate the whole thing. So first one is the quantification of the seismicity. So as you see, the particular Tezpur city, Assam city is shown in this particular area, northeast zone. If you look closely, what is the seismicity of this area, what are the number of flow faults, what are the previous earthquake data, and all can be seen in this particular figure. Of course, these the data are obtained from the literature. Basically, Raghukant et al. Has thoroughly studied this particular earthquake scenario, and also they generated a stochastic synthetic ground motion for this particular area, considering a very high earthquake magnitude of 8.7. Okay, so because this literature is currently available for a particular area, so we have adopted the Raghukant et al. Ground motion, whatever is recommended in his paper, considering all the seismicity of the area and other parameters. So that's about taking into consideration of the seismicity. And next is the seismic site characterization and ground response analysis, second stage. So if you see the soil profile at that particular site, it comprises of three predominant layers. Of course, loose sand up to the top of 5 meters, and then a clay type of soil, which is up to a red soil, which is represented here, which is extending up to about 10 meters. And below that, we have about 14 meters of high dense sand, and below the rocky type strata has obtained. We can see the SVT and value profiles here, and VS shear wave elastic profiles here, which represents obviously the different stratification and changes in the strength and stiffness, etc. This is a standard geotechnical characterization. As we are dealing with the earthquake and associated effect, dynamic soil properties, dynamic characterization is important. So in terms of the shear wave velocity, of course, it is shown then. And then additionally, we need to have the strain dependent dynamic properties, particularly which are the shear modulus and damping ratio for the particular site we need to determine. Generally, what we tend to do is when the site specific data, region specific data is not available, whatever is available in the literature which has been developed for other part of the country, we tend to use, for example, Seaton-Dittis models for the sandy type of soils, Wistek-Dobry models for the clay type of soils we generally tend to take. But some of our papers indicated that the necessity of site-specific characterization and their quantification is very essential to get the realistic picture of the ground performance. So with that requirement, laboratory experiments of the soils which are collected from the regions have been thoroughly studied by various type of dynamic soil characterization, then bend element testing, resonant column and cyclic axial testing, and dynamic simple shear testing. Of course, any two combinations can be taken, either bend element and cyclic axial or resonant column and cyclic axial, because we need to have the low strain behavior and high strain behavior to capture the complete variation of the shear strengths. You can see here the damping ratio is increasing with the shear strengths, and shear modulus reduction curve is reducing with the shear strength. So we have to capture complete thing. So here this particular figure will also indicate what are the strain ranges a particular test can be used, can be seen here accordingly. We can adapt this particular testing program. So these are various laboratory experiments, and as mentioned, Dr. Pradeep, for his PhD study, he has tested 4 different types of soils, 2 types of clays and 2 types of sands. In this particular study, we need to have one sandy type of soil, one red soil, the clay type of soil. You can see the grain size distribution of the clay soil, that's the red soil, and BS is the Brahmaputra sand, which is the sandy soil profile in this particular region. This is the soil profiles, and these are some typical results what were obtained as part of the dynamic characterization, and which have been published in various publications. For any further information, one can go through these documents. This is a comprehensive data for G by Gmax and damping ratio, damping curves. You can see here this particular data, so which has been published in 2019 in the Frontiers in Geotechnical Engineering book chapter. You can see here the bended element tests and resonant column tests were put together, and here the dynamic simple shear test results were put together, so that to get the complete picture of the data of G by Gmax curves for the complete range of the strains is obtained. Similarly, you can see the damping ratio curve variation for the over the wide range of the strains can be seen here. Similarly, there is another publication which used the resonant column test data and cyclic Tigel test data for particular soil to completely capture the complete modulus response and also the damping ratio response. The important finding from our studies is that when we test the soils for the very high seed strain levels, the damping ratio is decreasing beyond the 1% strain levels. Only few literature have reported such behavior which need to be taken care for the consideration, the analysis. So referring to the earlier figures, the finally data what we have chosen for this particular study, you can see here, this is the red soil having the placid index of 20%, sandy soil having the different confining pressures, what could be the G by G max values and what the damping ratio values are shown here. And the particular nonlinear pore water pressure generation models have been used as per these figures. So the data obtained from this dynamic characterization has been used to get the ground response analysis, that is the site response analysis using the deep soil. Deep soil is a equivalent linear or non-linear approach for obtaining the ground response. Is a open source program which is having a lot of features to get the ground response. You can see the soil profile here. We already discussed about the earthquake data. So these both the things along with the input parameters whatever obtained from the dynamic characterization in terms of the VS or Gmax and G by Gmax curves and damping ratio curves and liquefaction parameters in terms of the pore water generation model, etc. would be taken. And ground motion, whatever was selected from the Raghukant et al. Is originally as 0.138 G level. But to represent a different scaled motion, the ground motions are modified to scale to 0.05 G and 0.24 G to represent the three different earthquake motions. And ground response analysis has been conducted to get how the peak ground accelerations were changing along with the depth of the things. You can see the PGA levels are changing here. For example, if you see the very low G value, that is black dot line indicates the 0.05 G, amplification clearly seen. Whereas for the high G, the 0.24 G level, it is amplified up to here and then it is de-amplified. This de-amplification is due to the we can see here the shear strains, peak displacements are increasing, pore water pressure ratio are increasing. That means it indicates the liquefaction at this particular elevation. That's the reason. From this ground response analysis, one will also obtain the what is the ground motions at different elevations here. As the bedrock at 20 meters, 15 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters, and surface ground motion. If you look closely into these ground motions, this is 0.138 G. That means the blue line where it indicated here, no, in this particular figures, that is the corresponding to 0.2138 G. So if you look into the 5 meter and surface ground motion, you can see after some time, the frequency content is totally differed when you compare to the other ground motions at the other shallower depths. That means your pore water pressures are significantly shooted up and strains are more and more damping. So you see the ground response is totally different. These captured, these behavior should be incorporated directly into the ground motion. So what the accelerations, what we obtained, the corresponding displacement histories would be directly given as an input to the spring models to get the complete response of the pile foundation. Here, if you see the differentiate between the two different G level, how the behavior. So the 0.05 G, you can see the red line indicates the pore water pressure ratio. There is no increase in the pore water pressure ratio here. And this shear strains are there, very low shear strains are there here. And shear stress and shear strain, the loop, hysteresis loop is simply linear. There is not much damping here. Whereas when we did the
Professor Murali Krishna, you have to see the time.
Yeah. Okay, 25 minutes over, right? Okay. I'm getting 30 minutes. How much I'm getting? Madam?
Initially, we planned 25 minutes. Okay.
Okay,
It
okay.
take some time then.
Fine, fine. Okay, this is the ground response, pore water pressure ratio increase, and the shear strains you can see here 0.24 G level. The shear strains are very high here. You can see about 8% of the shear strain, and whereas 0.05 you will have, we had very low shear strain levels. This, and also you can see the hysteresis loop of the shear stress and shear strains, highly nonlinear behavior and more damping, etc. This is the whole behavior could be captured in the ground response analysis. So now coming to the integrated seismic analysis. So the Winkler spring model analysis has been modeled using the SAP 2000 model. This is the SAP 2000 typical model is shown. Before adopting the particular model for our study, there is a validation of the model is essential. So it was adopted to verify the Boulanger et al. 1999. This particular paper presented both the centrifuge model test as well as Winkler spring approach method also. Both results were available. The data were taken and all the models were simulated to verify the particular thing. This particular slide shows the validation of these particular data. So you can see the experimental data and BNWF model data from Boulanger et al. Whatever the results obtained, and whatever the data of the current study they are compared, they are reasonably compared well to simulate the behavior. So with that confidence, what we got, we went ahead to study the two pile foundations, what is the single pile and a group pile. This is the, what are the spring constants, what are the deviating stress and axial strain in the normal pile springs were obtained as per this one. In the cyclic Tyson test, after the liquefaction, a post-liquefaction strength also has been determined as per this curve. This is what the directly deviating stress and axial strain data. This data has to be used to calibrate, get the spring parameters which were obtained and modeled to give into the spring parameters. So now we can see the results obtained from the integrated analysis. Pile deformations at different elevations are shown here. What is the pile displacement and pile bending moment under different G levels are shown here. But clearly we can see here at high G level 0.138, 0.24 G, very high deformations and bending moments, which is obviously due to the liquefied stratification and the reduced spring values. The contrast between the string stiffness values has been shown here. So this particular slide shows the results from both the single pile and 2x2 group pile analysis. We can see here pile displacement in terms of pile displacement. When there is a no liquefaction condition, the single pile resulted a very small deformation, whereas the group pile, because of the massive pile cap at the surface and its small movement, also resulted into slightly higher displacement, that is 1.5 mm to 5 mm. But when the liquefaction was there, in that condition, the pile cap behaved very well, and only very marginal difference in the deformation can be seen here, whereas a single pile led to very larger displacement. The same thing can be seen in the other things also. Similarly, the bending moment behavior also, when we are having the liquefying soil, when you are using the group piles, they act like a rigid structure and perform much better to resist the earthquake loads. That's the advantage what we can get here. Yeah, so with that, I'm concluding my talk. So what we tried is an integrated approach for seismic analysis as a simplified method is presented here. So various components have been discussed, and there is a huge contrast of response is possible at the junction of the liquefiable, non-liquefiable soils, which was reported in this particular one. And the point to be noted is 2x2 pile group yielded less means deformations are very less compared to a single load under the liquefiable condition. The whole thing simplified BNWF based integrated analysis. It seems to simulate reasonably well for the thing, and which has been used by different researchers across the globe. Many of the structural engineers, of course, they adopt. The advantage of this one is it's easy to use 1D programs actually. It does not require high competition programming skills, and they can be adopted for designing of the new structures as well, pre-qualification of the existing structures of moderate importance. For any high important structures and where the budget and the available, one need to go for the sophisticated site-specific analysis using continuum analysis. So with that, I thank you all for your patient hearing. Sorry, Chairman, if I exceeded a couple of minutes, etc. Thank you.
Very nice, exhaustive lectures. That is compiling from top to bottom, from earthquake to till that how that pile or superstructure behaves. Like that, you have given it. Thank you very much. We'll have the question answer at the end of these sessions. Will be taken care by our co-chair. Now let us go for second lecture. Because the question box there is no questions. Anyhow, the question will come now only. So we'll have the questions at the end.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
Now we'll go for the second lecture, which is by Abhishek Kumar, IIT Guwahati. The title is Importance of Site-Specific Observations at Various Stages of Seismic Microzonation Practices. Dr. Abhishek Kumar is an Associate Professor at Department of Civil Engineering, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. His research areas include seismic source characterization, forward and inverse ground response analysis, seismic hazard assessment, and development of regional ground motion prediction equation. He has published more than 30 journal papers, 26 conference papers, and has guided several PhD students at and MTech and BTech levels. Dr. Kumar is working with agencies like DST, Minister of Earth Science and Nuclear Power Corporation of India, and a recipient of Inspire Fellowship from DST, Young Engineer Award 2015 from Indian National Academy of Engineering and Institute of Engineers, India, which is one of the prestigious award. I welcome Dr. Abhishek to present his lecture.
So, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thanks to the organizer for giving me this opportunity. I also thank the chair and the co-chair of the session for the introduction and coordinating for the session. So I will be talking about different observations which we have come across, like myself and students, which can actually alter our understanding and which can give maybe more accurate site-specific findings whenever we are trying to develop hazard maps or microzonation maps for different parts of, particularly for Indian subcontinent. What are the works we have done? We'll try to look into that part. And what are the different observations? So when we talk about earthquakes, generally we talk in terms of damages which have been witnessed by the people living in the area or reported in the newspaper, mostly in forms of damages. But we all know that it's basically the shaking which is happening because of the transfer of waves between the source and the site, and how the system responds, whether it can be a soil, it can be a building, it can be other utilities, how it's going to respond because of the vibration. It may undergo partial damage, it may undergo no damage, or it may undergo complete collapse. Same way, if you look into some of the damages which have been witnessed by different earthquakes in and around of Indian peninsula, subcontinent, you can see about 1897, 1905, 1934 Gaya Nepal earthquake, 2005 Kashmir earthquake. This is just to give you an understanding what kind of damages which have been witnessed in the past, and considering the population density, particularly in majority of locations along the Himalayan belt, and of course many of the important locations in northeastern part, we can witness if this kind of earthquake is going to get repeated in the future, what will be the level of damages one can expect. So that also gives a hint. We have to go for site-specific, more detailed investigations in comparison to the one which have been done in the past. list of significant earthquakes. We know about 1897, 1950 earthquake, but if you explore the history, we can get actually significant damages because of earthquake to as early as maybe 1100, particularly if you are talking about Himalayan belt. So starting from 1255 Kathmandu earthquake, and then you can have detail about how many fatalities were there. And then recently in the year 2015, we had this Pokhara earthquake, which was west of Kathmandu, which caused almost 10,000, as per official record, 10,000 fatalities, many more damages. And very recently in Assam, on 28th of April, we had another event in Dekiajuli, which caused widespread liquefaction in different parts of Assam. So it's like we are hearing something from the history based on exploring the literature available. At the same time, we are also seeing, even from major to moderate earthquakes, what kind of damages we are experiencing now. And keeping in mind, then we are having different seismic gaps in Himalayas, even Assam also. So what is the seismic scenario for which we have to be prepared for whenever we are going for a design of important infrastructure, whenever we are going for design of bridges, tunnels, because in northeast and in different parts of country, because of strategic point of view, a lot of infrastructure development is under process. So when we talk about earthquakes, is basically the release of built up energy at the source, that is focus, and then it is travel at different distances across, around the epicenter, depending upon what is the medium characteristics through which it is propagating. Sometimes there will be heterogeneity, sometimes there will be scattering, intrinsic attenuation, as a result of which, even at same distance around the epicenter, the ground motion characteristics, which one is going to see based on the ground motion records, it will be different. So in a wider sense, you can see there is a source and there is a site. Under the site, you are having local soil, which we generally understand based on local site effect, as discussed by Professor Murali Krishna also. And then beneath the local soil, we are having bedrock, having shear velocity 1500 meter per second or above that. So generally, from the source to the site, waves will be passing through the bedrock or crystal medium, and then these will be subsequently altered or amplified because of the presence of local soil before reaching the foundation of the building. Overall, you can see the entire process can be divided into source, propagation path, and site characteristics. These are some pictorial views where you can see how the situation was there before and what happened after the earthquake. Particularly for 2015 Nepal earthquake, 2011 Christchurch earthquake, New Zealand, and 2011 Japan earthquake. So these are the different damages which we generally see. But in the background, when we try to understand or forecast the level of ground shaking for the future, these are the primary three objectives one has to deal with. So primarily you can go with ground motion generated at the source, how these are getting attenuated, de-amplified or amplified. Collectively, it can be understood based on seismic hazard analysis, which also requires ground motion prediction equation, and then local site effect. So one can go for geotechnical, geophysical testing, indirect measurements also, and then quantification of induced effects like liquefaction. Now, when we go for microzonation practices, we try to understand what are the, depending upon the terrain type, depending upon the seismic activity of the region, we try to understand what is bedrock level seismic hazard analysis, what is surface level seismic hazard analysis, plus in addition to that, if it is hilly terrain, what are the chances of landslide occurrence, if it is plain terrain with subsequent overburden, what is the local side effect dominating in the region, and so on and so forth. If the terrain is changing very widely, we take also that into account. And then collectively giving different weights to different thematic layers, which are contributing to the overall hazard or hazard index. We can club all those thematic layers and come up with the microzonation maps. So there are different kinds of inputs which are required at different stages, and different outcomes are there, which will be after the processing. For like seismic hazard analysis, you will be getting rock level or surface level, depending upon the inputs considered. How much is the PG value expected at the site? Whether it is based on deterministic one, you will get the worst scenario. If you are interested to find out what is the most probable ground motion at the site, you can go with probabilistic one, which will give you what is the probability of accidents or the confidence at which you can propose the level of ground shaking. Now, what are the observations which I'm going to discuss here is identification of seismic sources or some information which can help you in understanding more accurately the seismic activity which the region is witnessing from time to time and which may or may not be the part of known earthquake catalog. Second one is seismic classification of earthquake recording station, because whatever data we are using for study, these have been recorded on different stations. So the important information about seismic site class of those recording stations is equally important. That enhances our confidence in using those data. Third one is path attenuation characteristics. As I mentioned, between the source and the site, a lot of parameters will be there which is controlling the ground motion characteristics. So how that can be addressed. Then development and selection of ground motion prediction equations and their assigned weights. We have some observations. I'm going to share those. Source characterization, and then local side effects, and then I'll go to the conclusion part. So first the source character, identification of the sources. Now, our earthquake catalog mainly composed of past earthquake data as well as the data which is since the earthquake recording had started, primarily after 1980. So 1986 Dharamshala earthquake we consider as the first earthquake which was used, for which the ground motion records are available. But if you explore, different literatures have used different duration of earthquake catalog whenever they are going for the determination of seismic activity, completeness analysis, and even for declustering work. What actually happens, you can see over here, different earthquake catalog, and more information we have for the catalog, more confidence it will, it will build while we are determining whether the seismic activity parameter or seismic hazard values. But most of the things, when we start hazard analysis, we take into account the information which is known to us at the present. But at the same time, we are having different signatures from time to time, particularly from historic earthquakes like 1897 or 1255 or so many earthquakes, which have triggered liquefaction or indirect evidences, which can be called as seismites also, which gives an indication like it's not only the duration in which we have earthquake records, the region was seismically active, but in the past also. So you have to take those considerations also into account. That will give you what are the possible sources available in the region, which one has to understand based on detailed site investigation, or we can go with literature before planning for any site-specific investigation. One is this one, where you can see in the history there was some earthquake which induced liquefaction. You can see when liquefaction occurs, there will be generation of pore water pressure. When it dissipates, it creates some kind of sand flows at the surface. But if this has happened maybe 200, 300 years before the present time, these might be stored, these characteristics might be stored in somewhere in the stratification. So one can go for detailed investigation at the site. This is going to tell you what was, if you go in further detail, that can also give you an idea about what was the source or magnitude of the earthquake which triggered it. And you can club those earthquake magnitude also in your earthquake catalog. Same way, you can also explore with respect to remote sensing and existing literature, where are fault scarps, sand dikes, fissures, all those, that will give you more enhanced information about the sources available in your study area, rather than maybe depending on one or two sources. Because these kind of studies are continuous process. So after every 5 to 6 years, you can get maybe some more earthquake information or source information available to you. You can refer to that. Site classification. Recording had started in different parts. So, but if you see, one is inconsistency because the distribution of those recording stations is not uniform. So whenever there is a source, you might be seeing in one particular orientation you are having record, and in other orientation you don't have any earthquake record. Same way, if you see, the classification of earthquake recording station site was given based on geology. So there was no in situ investigation done, primarily for PESMO's website. So we started doing for those recording stations, particularly in the Western Himalayas, based on horizontal to vertical spectral ratio, where you can find out, you'll get to know what is the natural frequency of the particular recording station, and corresponding to natural frequency, what is the amplification or horizontal vertical spectral ratio at the site. So based on natural frequency, you can correlate with respect to site classification values, and then you can classify a particular site. Subsequently, you can also determine VS30 values. And so that's how we determine for close to 90 recording stations. This is a published one. Then path attenuation, as I mentioned, between the source and the site, there will be different process of scattering, intrinsic attenuation, which will change the ground motion characteristics between the source and the site before the local soil effect comes into picture. So these are some recording stations, again from Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Delhi, which we had taken into consideration to understand. This is basic information where you can understand the amplification spectra at the recording station, which can be correlated with respect to the source characteristics as well as propagation path characteristics, considering all recordings are done for similar kind of site condition. So we can solve this equation considering a reference station where we can consider the propagation characteristics will not change significantly. You can solve this equation for determining the propagation path or change in amplification as a function of distance for different frequency of waves. And that's how you can get to know what is the average attenuation characteristics. You can also compare, this is going to give you different frequency of waves, which are going to, with respect to the distance, how these are getting attenuated or change in the amplification function. This is a comparison because these are local characteristics. So we cannot consider one region path characteristics to be applicable to a broader area or larger research area or study area. So you have to go for site-specific path attenuation characteristics. Then GMP we had used because recording station is a major issue. We have recordings, but site class of recording station, then propagation path, source characteristics of the recording station, that is a major issue. So we had considered some database. You can see here, this for different site classes. Of course, site A and B are relatively stiffer in comparison to site class E. So we had to classify the recording based on the recording station on which these records were done before using the same for recording stations. We also determined source characteristics, propagation path, as I mentioned in the previous slides. So using those source propagation path characteristics as well as amplification spectra, which we develop for each kind of site class, we try to generate synthetic motion using XSIM program, which was given by Motazzedian and Atkinson in 2005. These are the different fault mechanism solutions, stress, strike, dip, and other characteristics, which are relative to the magnitude taken from different sources. So it's like for each of these site classes, we try to generate all these recordings synthetically. Once synthetically generated and actually recorded were validated, you can see these are the validations done. Once these are validated, we generated additional ground motions for apparent stations. So this AS indicates apparent stations. You can consider for each recording station, we generated close to 35 recordings. And at the end, we generated close to 2,000 ground motion simulations were done, out of which 500 were taken randomly based on latent hypercube sampling, which takes care of all possible variation in different model parameters. After that, we have done regression analysis and tried to develop the ground motion prediction equation for North India for different site classes. So far, this is the only equation which is available for North India, which can be applied depending upon the site class of the recording station. You can select the coefficient and use this equation. Next part is source characterization, because whenever we go for seismic hazard analysis, we consider past earthquake data as well as fault, but we have to also take into consideration, like this is for northeastern part of the India. We have Eastern Himalayas, we have Indo-Burmese basin, then Bengal basin, then the northeastern part, which is undergoing some kind of rotation. So in such a case, we cannot consider the seismic activity to be uniform throughout the study area. We have to understand what are the possible variation in the seismic activity. And then, so we have considered particularly for Shillong Plateau. You can consider Shillong Plateau more or less, I mean, you can superimpose, it will be like the Meghalaya region. You can see the first one is past earthquake data. Second one is sources which are available in the region. But the third one, if you see, the rate of movement in the eastern part, in the central part, and in the northern part are completely different. That means the entire 500 kilometer radial distance is not going to behave same whenever contributing to the seismic activities in the near future, and has not responded also in the same way in the past also. Same way, if you see in terms of rupture characteristics, Bengal Basin, Indo-Burmese Range, Shillong Plateau, Assam Valley region, and Eastern Himalayas, you can see the rupture characteristic itself is same. So that means one part is not correlating exactly the same way in which the other part of the Shillong Plateau is considering. So if I want to attempt seismic hazard of the Shillong Plateau, I have to consider how different parts of this seismotectonic province are going to respond while adding or contributing to the seismic hazard analysis. So that's how, based on this analysis, we consider this entire 500 kilometer radial distance is not going to remain same, but it is going to behave in 4 parts. You can see Eastern Himalayas, Bengal Basin, Indo-Burmese Range, and Shillong Plateau, Assam Valley region. Another observation which we understood here, whenever we go for any study area like Shillong or Tura here, we consider the source characterization definition which we have used in the previous slide. But if you see the Shillong Plateau, the Shillong city, the range of epicentral distance of this city with respect to each of those source zones will be different. As a result, whenever we are trying to understand the weights or ranks of different GMPs, it is going to change. You can see over here for Shillong, you can see some GMPs are there. You can see NDMA was found 0.59 as the weight, but at the same time, if you move your study area from Shillong to Tura, your weights have significantly narrowed down to Anbolgan et al. 2013. Same way for other parts also you can understand. So it means depending upon the size of your study area and depending upon the position of your site, your weights of the GMPs are not going to remain same because of relative position of your study area and your site within the study area. So this is one important observation one has to see, rather than taking same weights of each of these GMP throughout the study area. That means if you are going for a very large study area, you cannot use same weights. You have to actually divide the study area into different parts and then go for determination of weights and ranks of the GMPs. Now, uncertainty with respect to earthquake occurrence, I'll directly go to the site. Now, this is observation. First slide, you can see this is based on deterministic seismic hazard analysis. You can see, as per this analysis, the northern part is corresponding to very high seismic hazard.
Abhishek, we don't have time, 3-5.
Yeah, maybe another 2 minutes maximum.
Thank you.
So this one is, okay, I'll go to quickly. So this one is basically going to tell you, because 1897 earthquake was a worst scenario earthquake, but if you take probabilistic hazard, the chance of that kind of earthquake to get repeated in the future will be less, which can be evidenced in the probabilistic seismic hazard value. So seismic contour has completely reversed when we go for probabilistic seismic hazard. Okay, local side effect. I'll just go to the observation here. Yeah, so go to the same site. If you apply different ground motion, your amplification is going to change. So that's why whenever you are going for ground response analysis, you have to go for more number of ground motions to get a complete picture of boreholes, local site effect. I'll just show you here. Yeah. So here you can see, depending upon the input motion characteristics, your same soil is going to show amplification as high as 0.5, 5.5 to as low as 1.0. So this is called as dynamic soil response curve. The same thing was observed for Nepal also. Yeah, this one. So based on this, one can determine spectral acceleration coefficients also. Okay, I'll stop here. I'll just go to the observations. These were, yeah. So whenever you are going for hazard analysis, you have to update your seismic sources. Same way, extreme events are there, but the probability of the extreme events also have to be considered into account. Input motion alters local side effects significantly, so that has to be understood. Last point is important. Generally, when we go for microzonation practice, we assign high weights to higher amplification as well as higher PHA value. But both of them cannot happen simultaneously, so one has to take those into account. Thank you so much. So any question is there, I would like to answer to that. Thank you.
There is no question in the question box. We will have the questions at the end. Since because of time, the time is already 7. We hope to invite the third speaker, and we will have the questions at the end of the session.
We'll take all the questions at the end.
Okay. Now, thank you, Abhishek, for your nice presentation. This is a very exhaustive study which you have done for this microzonation process. One has to do like this only for exact microzonation. It's not taking some kind of earthquake like deterministic, etc., etc. So now it has gone. The microzonation has gone for a very high resolution. If I see my experience of the past 45 years. Thank you very much. We'll come to you later. Now I invite Professor Rangaswamy from NIT Calicut to give his lecture. He is a BTech from JNTU College of Engineering, MTech Geotechnical Engineering from SVU College of Engineering Tirupati, and a PhD from IIT Madras. So with this background, I invite Professor Rangaswamy to deliver his lecture on the title Influence of Bio and Nanomaterials on Dynamic Characterization of Soils. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, madam. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much for the chairing of the session and for organizers to given this opportunity to present the topic on influence of bio and nanomaterial and dynamic characterization of soils. Is it audible, madam?
Yes, sir, audible.
Yeah. Okay, madam. Okay. So actually, this is the work done by my research scholars, Geetu Thomas and S. Smita. So Geetu Thomas working on nanoparticle stabilization of this clayey soil, and Smita is working on biopolymer treated silty sand. Generally, if you go for background, you know that in general, in case of ground improvement, ground improvement of soils, we are using traditional additives like cement, lime, and fly ash, etc., to improve the geotechnical properties of the soil. Even though it is improving the strength of the soil, but it is having some drawbacks, like it is causing environmental pollution as well as expensive also. So that to overcome those limitations, like maybe just nowadays, like there is a new innovative traditional additives like non-traditional additives like nano material and biopolymers are utilizing to improve the ground. So it is a proof that it is improving the geotechnical properties under static loading and also under dynamic loading. It is proved actually. So that if you see that among this biopolymer and nanopolymers, like different types of biopolymer nanopolymers available now. So if you look at that biopolymer, so biopolymer is like a biological origin and it's the environment friendly. Why we are using biopolymer nanoparticles in ground improvement? Means generally it is giving good strength. At the same time, it is also environmental friendly and also cost effective. So less cost actually, because we are using very less amount to improve the ground here. So like if you look at the biopolymer is biological origin and environment friendly. Like we have different types of biopolymers available, like agar, xanthan, gar, and geochitosis. Many biopolymers are available. So definitely, like this type of biopolymers are using in different applications, like in case of food industry, the paramedical industry, and microbiology, etc. And then see why we are why biopolymers to be used in the ground improvement means, like, see that it should be sustainable. Sustainable mean it may be not only like strength point of view, it could be sustainable in terms of environment, economical aspects, and also like cost point of view. So that you can see like it's be sustainable with respect to vegetation, because it is helping to improve it is helping to grow the vegetation. That's why it is really like helping to it is supporting vegetation, and it won't cause this harm to the soil organisms. It may be cost effective. Suppose if you are producing bulk quantity of this biopolymer in the plant, and it could not be harm to the existing structure, maybe like less labor may be required if you compare to other traditional treatments. So that like see that if you look at the biopolymer, there is also there is a specific type like gel type of biopolymers are existing. So this gel type of biopolymer are filling the pore spaces, and because this so it is absorbing the water and making as a hydrogel. So because of this hydrogel, it is reducing the pore water pressure, excess pore water pressure built up during dynamic loading also. So if you see that practical, it could be used in case it could be used in different ways. Like you can go for mixing this biopolymer in mixing type, or maybe injecting type, or maybe some like it could be used for building material, pavement, etc. And if you see that this slide is giving more information about biopolymer, okay, use like see that how it is possible to make a biopolymer suspension like in the field itself. See, this is the hard biopolymer suspension. After making the biopolymer suspension, it could be like a mix at the site itself, like a biopolymer style could be mixed here, and it could be used for making the improvement in case of shallow foundation, and it could be used for like this dewater blacking of seepage water, and it could be used for reinforcing the slopes like slope stability, and also it could be used for like vegetation improvement, and also it could be used for like deep mixing in the form of like grouting. So it could be used for erosion protection, like it could be used for as a construction material to make a building blocks like that, and see that it can be also using as a like road material like for the stability also. So like many applications it is having now. So now see that like that similar to biopolymer, nanotechnology also very like is emerging in the field of ground improvement technique. Like it is introduced by the Dr. Richard like in 1959. So this is the mechanism behind this nano material is like because it is having very small size particle. Because of very small particle, actually specific surface area of this nanoparticles is spreading very large. So and it is connecting with the particle and giving the strength like it is explained by the Shahani et al. 2015. So that this nano metal could be available in the form of nano silica, nano alumina, nano magnesia, like nano deuterium, etc. So like it could be also in case of concrete technology and ground improvement, etc. See that if you see that mechanism here, you can see like first you can see that this is the same volume, like if you take only 1 centimeter cube of volume. See that if it is 1 centimeter cube of the particle, it is spreading 6 centimeters of surface area. But if you go for 1 mm of like nanoparticle cube, like it is spreading 60 centimeters square surface area. But if you go for 1 nano like micrometer, so they see that this is spreading is very small, like total surface area about increasing 600 lakhs of centimeters. So like that, see that because of this spreading of this increasing surface area, definitely it is spreading like in between the pores of the clay particles and improving the strength a lot, like there is structure. So actually here I'm going to present the test series like test 1 and test 2. Like test 1 is like the improvement of silty sand by using the agar biopolymer, and test 2 is that is improving the clay soil by using cement and nano silica. Like 1%, this is the optimum doses of nano silica and cement 1%. So that here the after making the soil specimen, like it is cured for 7 days in case of silty sand, and it is cured like 28 days in case of like clay soil. And these critical samples are subjected to cyclic loading with 1 mm of amplitude and a cyclic strain loading, and it is confined with 100 kPa pressure. So like these are the material collected just nearby the like a Calicut. So that first I'm going to explain biopolymer stabilized silty sand. See that this is the like silty sand we got from the local area. Like these are the properties, like it is a gravel silt and the sand silty, the proportions are given. Specific gravity is given here. So angle of friction angle is 32 degrees and cohesion is 0 here. And if you see here, if you look at the gradation curve of this soil, like it is between, like see that these boundaries are given like the boundaries for the liquefiable zone are given like by the Chuchida 1970. So based on this one, this gradation, if the present soil is going to liquefy, it is classified as silty sand here. So now actually like in this work, like the agar type of biopolymer used, because this agar biopolymer having some specific features like like it's a gel type of biopolymer. So it could be melt above 85 degrees Celsius and solidifies below 40 degrees Celsius. And actually it is having high mechanical strength. Of course, it is environmental friendly also. And see that if you see that the chemical structure of this agar biopolymer section, it is having repeating the units of monomer the galactose. Let's see that here it is repeating completely, so that OH and CH2O ions, it is repeating that, so that. So because of this connectivity chemical structure, it is improving the strength of the soil. Let we see that one how it will be improved. Okay, this is the biopolymer specifications are given like from the manufacturer, like it is in the form of like a powder, like it's a white powder. And see that how actually in this work, like this specimen, treated specimen and treated specimen is prepared for loose density, loose relative density, that is the 30% relative density. See here like how it is prepared agar biopolymer treated specimen. You can see the stages here. First it is taken like distilled water in this okay beaker, like this distilled water corresponding to saturation water content. So then later it is 2%, here 2% agar biopolymer added to the soil. That's why 2% biopolymer is added to this distilled water. Actually 2% means it's 2% weight of the soil. Like if I take 100 grams of soil, like 2 grams of biopolymer, like that. So once after adding this biopolymer, here it is heated at 85 degrees Celsius temperature to make this hot suspension. Like here biopolymer suspension. So this biopolymer suspension added to woven dry sand, silky sand, woven dry silky sand, like directly over that one. See that once after pouring this hard biopolymer suspension to the woven dry sand, it is mixed uniformly. It is mixed uniformly. Then okay, to make this specimen, cylindrical specimen, we have taken this split mold. This split mold, like side of the walls are like maybe oiled by using wire brush, and then like this whatever this prepared this soil biopolymer soil suspension is placed in the this split mold to make the cylindrical specimen loose condition. This is the way how we are going to make the cylindrical specimen. These cylindrical specimens are cured at room, maybe environmental room temperature about 30 to 35 degrees Celsius for the curing purpose, about 7 days to 20 days maybe. So once after making this specimen and the curing after maybe 7 days, then it is going to test for cyclic loading. So we have cyclic cycle testing facility. So this is the cycle. So one, see here the specimen, whatever prepared a specimen, like after curing, okay, after curing for 7 days, it is placed in this triangle cell and like within the rubber membrane. Then after that it is saturated. It is saturated to bring like B value about 0.95. Then it is consolidated to the required confining pressure of effective confining pressure of 100 kPa. After that it is subjected to cyclic load at a strain controlled mode at 1 mm amplitude to get the result. See that once if you see that result, actually it is improving the maybe liquefaction resistance and also dynamic properties of these silty sand. See if you see that here pore pressure response with respect to the number of cycles. Like if you in case of untreated soil, like see that it is liquefied, it is completely liquefied about maybe 20 cycles, around 15 cycles. So that means excess pore pressure ratio already reaches 1, maybe a 20 to 25 cycle. But if you come to this treated soil, still see the even after 50 cycles also it is having only less than 60%. So even if you go for continuing, even if this case is continuing up to 200 cycles, it is same amount only. That's why it is clearly says that because of the treating the soil with this biopolymer, definitely it is improving the liquefaction resistance very clearly. So not only that, liquefaction resistance is also improving the dynamic properties of the soil. See, dynamic properties are like secant modulus and damping ratio. So the secant modulus, okay, it will be the secant modulus will be get like due to this inclination of this loop, and like because based on the area of the loop, we can see that damping ratio also. Like that, see that inclination is more, definitely shear modulus is also more. Like area of the loop is more, like width of response, width of the loop is more, definitely the damping ratio also will be more, like that. You can see here. You can see here, this is the untreated, this is the untreated and treated one. See, in case of untreated, like this is the steep, this is the like flat slope, and if you come to this like treated soil, it is having very steep slope. That means inclination is more. So because of inclination more, definitely it is having more shear modulus when compared to untreated one. Not only that, you can see that this is the wider width, this area of this loop is more in case of nuclear soil when compared to untreated soil. That means damping ratios damping ratio also is increasing with like with this treatment at maybe 2% of the agar biopolymer. So the if you see that with respect to number of cycle, how like this shear modulus damping are varying, like in this table is in case of untreated cells these are the values, but if you come to treated cell you can see how it is improving with respect to number of cycles, like Z value and D value both are improving here, both are improving in case of treated soil. So even generally actually shear modulus may be improved because of stiffness, but here damping ratio is also increasing. That is because of actually here biogel. The biogel is a soft material which is act as a sponge, and there is a transition between the soil to like this is like maybe this biopolymer like a soft material. Because of transition from stiff to soft, then it may be like damping ratio is increasing because of that. So because here the gel is act as a damper, maybe like it is absorbing the vibrations. That is the maybe reason here. So like that you can see that mechanism very clearly can show that. It can see that like it is like see that in case of like I said, it's more pore voids are there in case of untreated soil. So that this pore voids, see that because of treating the soil with a biopolymer, see that here whatever gel, this biopolymer, just see the pores are filled by this biogel, so that even during the after saturation, this biogel connecting the particles, the biogel is swelling. Actually it is swelling, this biogel is swelling and it's act as a matrix, so that it's interconnecting, so that there is a swelled biogel. So because of swelling, this whatever pore voids are filled completely with this biogel, swelling biogel. Because of that, definitely okay, the strength is improving. That like you can see even same analysis, from the same analysis you can see that in case of untreated sand is having more voids here, pore voids here. This pore voids are connected, see this whatever this L particles are connected by this like biogel due to this aggregate formation, like pores are filled by this biogel. And if you come to like see that like even during the saturation while increasing, like during saturation, like during time, here it is also bridging the connection. Biopolymer bridges this very this connection. Okay, it's aggregate like layers are connecting. It's a bridging. So bridging is clearly visible here how it is connecting these like silicate sand particles with the help of this bridging form biopolymer. So this is about the biopolymer. Like that, if you come to like nanomaterial also, in case of in this study like this nano silica has used to treat the clayey soil. So this clayey soil particles, clayey soil properties are given here. Like it is
Professor
highly
Rangaswamy, sir,
please tell me, madam.
you have to wind up by at least 3
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to very fast now, madam.
Thank you, thank
Yes, I'm going to very. This is the properties of the soil. So that of course this is the here nano silica used, like this is the powder form in white. It is in white color. So that actually here we are using like we have used like different proportions of like nano silica, but of course it is found that 1% is the optimum one, because even though after adding 1%, 2%, 3%, so because of very like small size, like the surface is goes on increases, it's very difficult to mix it also. So that it's not possible to like get uniform mix. That's why like it is stopped with only 1%. Of course, economical point of view also 1% is better actually. So like to make this specimen here, slurry deposit method used. Slurry deposit method like it is helping to give the like homogeneous soil mix, homogeneous clay soil mix, as well as like it is decreasing, it is reducing saturation time and also conserve time. So once this specimen is prepared and like with this like nano silica, then it is cured up to 28 days. So once if it is cured, then again it is placed in the triangle cell in and is subjected to cyclic loading. So like so once it is subjected to cyclic loading, it shows that like core pressure response is like that. You can see here in case of even after like maybe 200-300 cycles also, like in case of untreated soil, it is see that it is like pore pressure ratio is increasing up to 50%. But if you come to treated soil, it is significantly reduced. That's why we can say that easily even like because of this nano treatment, definitely they it may be it is resisting the liquefaction as well as it is reducing it is helping to reduce the pore water pressure also because of gel formation. So like here also you can see that dynamic properties of the soil, like this is untreated soil. In case of this is the shear modulus, this is damping ratio. Like see, if you in case of lithium soil, like there is whatever shear modulus and damping is increasing significantly, that is only because of mechanism behind like the here since this is the Portland and Portland cement is reacting with the optimum moisture content present in the soil, and it is inducing like see this is gel, this is the primary gel and calcium hydroxide, but his own primary gel could not be strong enough to connect the particle. Of course, this additionally CaOH2 also is not giving any importance. So that if you like with this, if you add like the nano silica, definitely the whatever remaining this calcium hydroxide is reacting with the nano silica, and it is forming as a secondary gel against gel. This secondary gel is very strong to connect the particle and give the dynamic properties of the soil actually. So like that, here see that is based on that one, you can also see this same result. Like this clay particles are very like flaky thin one, and see that because of reaction between the cement and this particle, like crystal, you can see that maybe of course the crystals are formed, but of course still it's middle size only. But if you come to like this like nano silica and cement stabilization here, so this crystal are like it's a very big one. So that because increase in crystal, like it is forms as a like granular crystal form, so that they because of this only like strength is improved a lot in case of this nano silica and the cement stabilization. So in summary, like definitely like nano silica and biopolymer stabilization agents are really helping to improve the like liquefaction resistance of the soil, and as well as like dynamic properties of the soils also. Okay, thank you, madam.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Professor Rangaswamy, and
Okay,
you given
thank you.
a very good presentation on
Yeah.
so many studies only on static load characterization. Now you
Yeah,
given
yes,
a view
madam. Yeah, it's a
to
cyclic
newly
load.
bio
Yeah.
on dynamic properties. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Now I give the session to our co-chair to conclude and give his information. Thank you.
Yeah.
In the question and answer, I am not seeing any questions. So if you audience prefer to ask any questions through this platform, they can ask now.
Only we go to ask if the participants are very less.
I think participants are less.
Questions. We have a lot of questions. But
Yeah,
now we don't have time. You
I have
cannot,
one. I have,
you
I have
can
one.
give your
that is
feedback.
true.
Ah,
I have one question for Professor Murali Krishna. Professor Krishna, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, in your presentation, there is one conclusion was there that the 2x2 pile yields less due to the pile soil pile interactions. Can you elaborate on that?
As a
Compared to the single pile, it yields less. So can you elaborate how?
no, as a rigid mass, it is able to resist the deformation. Okay,
But we are talking about the interaction between the pile mass and the soil, right?
Yeah.
So if the pile is itself rigid, it does not make any difference to the interaction with the soil. The pile mass as a whole may be very rigid. But end of the day, we are talking about the interaction between that pile mass, the 2x2 pile mass, and the soil. So how it is 2x2 pile is yielding less? Why? Because yielding is done by the soil only, right?
Right. Yielding is done by the soil.
Yeah. So how come?
The bending moments and pile displacements are the pile element, how it is deforming. Okay, the diagrams results what is the bending moment in the pile section, how much it is resisting, because it is having additional rigidity on the top because it is connected with the 4 piles, right?
Okay.
And though it is ground is moving, the whole piles they are integratedly acting. In the first part, when there is no liquefaction part, okay, the simple movement is there. Okay. So that time, because the heavy soil, heavy pile sections are moving, okay, there is a slightly higher bending moment than the single pile. Then the second part, where the liquefaction is there, where the lateral resistance is not much from the soil, okay, then because the pile as a group, it is resting at the bottom, okay, it could resist more thing, and slight increase in the bending moment is there but it's not very significant so that it will lead to failure condition.
Okay, so it is more likely stable by itself, right?
Yeah, stable, yeah.
When it is 2 by 2, it is more stable by itself.
Yes, stable matters. In the case of liquefiable, non-liquefiable condition, the difference is.
Yeah, that will be significant. Yeah. And I have one question for Professor Abhishek Kumar.
Yeah, go ahead, please. I'm here.
Yeah. Achha, you have in one slide, you have given that generation of synthetic ground motion. So, do you create this ground motion using some software? Because I have done some limited work using, while I was doing my modeling using Fluxys, I have some established earthquake wave which I can input into this Fluxys model and see how it will vibrate and how it will affect the parts. So, is it similar to that, the generation of synthetic ground motion?
No. Generation of synthetic ground motion, that is separately a detailed tool available. Not actually multiple tools are there, but you have to give the regional properties there. As I mentioned, bedrock properties, then rupture characteristics, orientation of fault plane, all those things you have to give. Even the focal depth you have to define, then only it will give. And it's not like directly it generates something and you are going to use it. So you have to validate also before using it.
How you validate that?
So that's what, I mean, we have some ground motion records in different parts.
That is what I'm saying. Do you have the ground motion records for all the region?
All the region means?
You are only interested in the earthquake specific area, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but if some area which is coming earthquake in every 50 years or 100 years, generally we do not have much record of those areas. So what about those areas?
See, those areas, you can have some history, even for peninsular India, like myself and Professor Murli, we are working for peninsular India. Some earthquake records will be there. So with that information, at least representative ground motion you can generate. Okay. Validation may not be possible because, as you mentioned, once in 50 years it is coming. So first of all, you understand the seismic activity is not so high, like without validation you cannot use it. But rather than generating one or two scenario earthquake, you can generate for larger pool and then use it for your purpose.
So how you will manage when there is no validation data to manage?
No. If it is not there, then rather than if nothing is there for validation, but still your catalog suggests there are some earthquakes in the past which have happened, you can generate a larger data set from synthetic motion and use it to understand possible variation of those maybe frequency content or amplitude on your model study.
Okay, then take the worst case scenario, right?
Not every time, it depends for what purpose you are using it. Because worst case scenario, if you use every time, may or may not be serving your specific purpose. So you have to take decision on that part.
Okay, that is all. I one more question for Professor Rangaswamy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Actually, I also did some SEM test.
Yes. SEM.
Sorry. So
yes, sir.
Yeah, in that the problem is that the chamber in which we do the test, they want it to be dry sample, right? Now you are telling that you have done that.
It's a queued sample actually. It is a queued samples.
Queued sample means what?
Yeah, actually, so you are looking for biopolymer or maybe nanosilica stabilized. Which one, sir?
I want to ask you about those sand samples and clay samples, right? I am concerned with the sand sample because the problem with sand sample is that if you keep it dry, there is a possibility that while doing the test, the dust will be created and it will be not good for that SEM machine. Second, if you are keeping...
Manas, sir.
Yes, sir. 1 minute, sir. Just
we have to log into plenary section.
Sir, 1 minute, sir. Okay, I will ask maybe Geetu Thomas. Geetu Thomas, my research scholar, is here because they did actually. Geetu Thomas.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please. Could you go that one very fast?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir,
because they are only real.
Yes, sir. Sir, that problem is really there. The thing is that actually I have taken a subject in nanotechnology and I have already discussed this matter to the professors there. They are telling like one option is there, ESEM, that is called ESEM, environmental SEM. In normal SEM, there are 3 tunnels are there. in which one tunnel should be, that specimen keeping tunnel should be in vacuum. Only dry samples can be tested there.
Okay.
Otherwise, that will damage the vacuum system in that SEM. Only ESEM can be provided with a somewhat wet samples. But in most of the institute, ESEMs are not properly working or not available. But by considering the available resources here, we have almost all the papers are based on this SEM. Almost all the papers in India are based on this SEM results only. Only I have seen in China, Japan, those papers having ESEM results. But the thing is that even after drying, those changes are visible, somewhat visible compared to ESEM. So with this restrictions here, we are conducting SEM, and somewhat changes with some properties like podolandite, calcium hydroxide, calcium carbonate, and some gel formations can be visible, but we cannot visibly see any bacteria which are alive in that.
Okay.
That is the thing, sir.
Okay, that's all from
I
my
think
side.
we have 3 questions.
Yeah.
Our co-chair can conclude the
Okay.
session. Yeah.
I want to thank Professor Dinesh, Professor Srivalsa, and Professor Ravi Jaka for giving me the opportunity to be a co-chair in this session. So thank you, sir. And Premalata madam, thank you. Thank you for.
I didn't know that you did your PhD from IISc.
Yeah. We are myself
year?
and Dr. Murli Krishna who are working side by side. I was doing.
How did I miss it then?
Pardon?
How did I miss you then?
I was in North India, sir. I mean, not in South India. If I had been in South India, maybe knowing me.
No, not like that. We have to grab him and talk to him. He will be fully working in the lab.
Now his time is running out. All of us will have to join the plenary session. I take this opportunity to thank the chair, Professor Premalata madam, on behalf of the organizing committee. I also thank Professor Manas Boy for the co-chair of this session for successfully conducting this program. Thank you very much, sir. And at the same time, I thank Professor Murli Krishna who delivered this SOAP lecture. And I also thank Abhishek Kumar who delivered the special lecture, and Professor Kodi Rangaswamy from NID Calicut who delivered another special lecture. On behalf of the organizing committee, we are highly thankful to you, sir, for all of you for making it for delivering it and making it happen. Thank you all. Thank you. So now I request all of you to join for the plenary session there.